Just
I ain't trying to show nothing, so I want to make sure.
hello, everyone. I am Reverend Lakeisha Womack, for those of you who don't know me. And today we are doing a special live interview on Rethinking Leadership with Dr. Arnita Fowler. She and I actually met through the Rethinking Church Virtual Summit, and we've had hours and hours of conversation around leadership because, as some of you may know, I do leadership development consulting, and Dr. Fowler has a PhD in leadership. Is that correct?
I have my doctorate in organizational management and leadership.
Okay, gotcha. See, I knew I was going to get that all messed up, but that's why I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself and just tell our audience a little bit about your background and why you chose to get a doctorate in leadership or organizational management.
Hi, yes, my name is Dr. Arnita Fowler. I was raised in New York by way of Virginia, and I joined the military at the early age of 23. So I'm a mother of one. My son passed away about 20 years ago. He was my only child. And it is that leadership ability to be able to execute and to be able to have an impact that allowed me to be able to find my son when he went missing. So that's another story. But I just want to say how your skill sets in leadership impact your life, your holistic life in regards to from one end to the other. But when I joined the military at 23, what I realized is that once I got in, I found myself constantly in this leadership worker discovery mode. Every day was like something new, you know. And when you're going into the military, of course, you want to demonstrate your best. You want to excel as fast as you can, and you want to learn, right? The military taught me a lot about discipline. But what I found was that the challenge of understanding and recognizing effective leadership. And so over time, as I began to progress through the ranks, I wanted to do like any other situation, look at leadership and say, this is what I'm not going to do, you know? And there was no book that they could really give you. They can teach you about leadership in a broad way. So I just began to start saturating myself in leadership. I was applied and was selected to teach leadership development in the military. I applied and was selected to be a basic trainer in basic training. And so it just continued to go on from there until I began to start identifying leadership gaps, and I started identifying training gaps. And what's the relationship between what should be between the leader and the worker? And so that continued to be a pattern throughout my career. I just wanted to be able to be a positive impact. And I realized that if I was going to learn this leadership thing, I was not going to look to one person to do it, you know, and everybody's mentor that they claim called out was always someone that was deceased. And then that just resonated with me. And I'm like, wait a minute, how can all of our leaders who we look to for mentors be deceased? And so this is where I understand that you got to be what it is you're looking for.
Right. So how would you say leadership in the military is different from leadership outside of the military?
Well, you know, I believe that in the military, there's an anticipated structure, a laid out structure, a predetermined structure that's designed. And in military, we have a lot of various requirements based on your field, based on the ops tempo. So you could have a blend of leadership styles in the military, you know, and you have to be swift on your feet, and you have to be quick, and you got to be decisive. And it was that decisiveness that is necessary that could be a matter of life and death. I worked in the health administration field where I was command and control, moving troops from downrange to home for redeployment and then leaving with them to go on deployment. And it is that environment where you really don't have an opportunity to second guess yourself, you know. Right. And you have people depending on you. If you take 50 people over there with you, you want to bring 50 people back just like you took them over there because their parents are counting on you. And this is what I look at leadership as. And in the organizations outside of leadership, there is just this inconsistency, I believe, where there's a blend of all types of leadership, but no real uh, clear line for types of leaderships. And so you always ran into this conversation that always started with, well, that's their management style. And, you know,
That's very interesting because there is like a little more latitude in like the professional world about your style, and people give you grace for your style. Whereas I guess in the military, it's more structured because you have to perform, like you said, because it's a matter of life and death.
yeah.
I know that there's a huge push to hire like veterans in the secular world. So, well, I guess like that's a church term, but in the corporate world, there's a push to like hire veterans. Do you think that it's difficult sometimes for people who have been in the military to translate their leadership skills or what they learned into like the corporate environment?
So there is definitely a challenge. The one thing about the military is that you bring so many different skill sets with you. You know, depending on if you're active duty or if you're reserve, and therefore you have a civilian component to your 9 to 5, right? And in that case, you have exposure to various leadership styles because you are working not only with military but with civilians, right? But we get in such a habit of writing out performance reports in a military style and structure. We already have these keywords that you know that the reader is looking for. So after 32 years in the military, for me, I was just able to write military style, right? When I retired and I went to the transition process, and then when I got out, I realized I had to stop, pause, hold up, wait a minute, and buy some books and some resumes and just redesign and convert my own resume. And yes, they offer services out there, but who can translate better than you if you have someone that you can brainstorm with and references you can make? And it was just a process of learning what it is I was looking for and what I had and what was the gap between it. And so, yeah, it took me some months, but I perfected that resume writing piece of it, you know, just to be able to speak to it. So yeah, I learned a lot coming out of the military. Let's just say that.
Gotcha. Well, one of the things that you and I have had a lot of conversation around are the different types of leadership. So can you explain like why it's important for a leader to understand what type of leader they are?
Absolutely. There is when you go to school and you study leadership, you learn just like any other career field that there's a name for everything, right? You go, oh, I recognize that behavior, because that's the word you hear thrown around a lot. Behavior. And I think we do ourselves a disservice professionally as leaders if we don't really understand who we are as a leader, right? You have to know who you are and what it is that you are looking for from your workers or for those who you work with, right? So I looked at transformational leadership and I looked at transactional leadership in my studies. And just to put it in plain language, transformational leadership is really where you want to inspire people to do what it is you want them to do. I mean, you want a lot, and it's more people driven than it is goal driven, you know? Whereas transactional leadership can be that transaction, just like I said, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, right? And so transactional leadership seems to be like there's always something on the table, always something to gain and lose, you know? And so that's really what I look at. And those things jump out to me. And I don't think people really know what it is, what leadership style that they have a lot of times, unless you invest in yourself, right? And to make yourself better, or to learn what your gap is, and to be able to invest in yourself pretty much as a leader.
Well, that's a great point, because some people believe that like either you are a leader or you're not. So do you believe that leaders can be developed, or do you think that some people are just born to lead, whereas others are not?
Oh, I love that question. I came across that question so much in my study, and I think I like to overthink it, you know?
Right.
So I learned that both can happen. Let's just say that the two things can be true. Leaders, there are born leaders who are just innate in what it is, what they do, right? But there's also that opportunity to add to that component. So you're never perfected. There's always room for improvement and excellence when it comes to being a born leader, right? I mean, being a born leader means you're just born to be able to adapt and adjust, right? and to do the thing you need to do, like execute, impact, influence. When it comes to developing leader, yes, those things can definitely be trained, but it takes a two component, the practical and the academic, where you really have to understand what it is and then execute what it is. And you just take, what they say, what suits you, what suits the environment. Again, you have to be able to be like a situational leadership, so you have to be able to be flexible, and you got to change. You just can't it's not a cookie cutter profession. Let me just say that.
Gotcha. And one of the things, like as you're saying that, I'm thinking about, leadership in churches and leadership in government and leadership in corporations. And we're really seeing, like across the board, the impact that leadership has on an organization. So why is it that organizations like church, business, government, whatever, have such a hard time holding leaders accountable? And actually, Makesha Dorsey, one of my Facebook friends, posted this question yesterday. She was like, just asking, like, why is it, especially like in the church in her context, but I'm thinking broadly, why do we have such a hard time holding leaders accountable for their actions?
So for that question, I reflect back on a moment that I realized that when you're a true leader, they talk about trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about accountability, there's this trust factor that jumps out at you. And then there's this relationship factor that jumps out. And I think it all gets jumbled together. And what I believe people need to understand is that leadership in regards to accountability is respect.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can disagree on something.
Right.
And when it comes to what's right and what's wrong, or what looks right, and accountability, and be respected for the fact that you have a voice.
Mm.
And if you can look at it in that sense, that having a discussion, disagreeing on something doesn't necessarily mean you're not being accountable, but you got to be able to speak to that. You can't just make a decision because somebody thinks you should. You
Right.
can't make a decision because it's in your best interest. You got to have the people best interest, and you got to understand what the bottom line is for your organization and be honest about it. And when you're honest and you bring up challenging situations, you're really respected for the fact that you have a voice. And that's how I look at it. And that's where I see the challenge is that don't be afraid to speak up, because people can respect you when you speak. I know I do. I'd rather for you to tell me your point of view. I'd rather for us to have various options as opposed to just one way of doing things, because all of that leads to decision. Like I always tell people, I love a good debate.
Right.
Because out of a debate come great ideas and great decisions. But what if you never held that conversation when it came to accountability? Because that's where you get the trust and the respect factor at.
Yeah, because it's interesting to me that like some leaders don't want to be challenged and they don't want you to disagree. And I always find that like when you're not able to withstand criticism, or when you're not able to hear the other side, then it puts you in a position that you might find yourself in a pothole that you could have avoided if you had just listened to that critique and then to determine whether it's valid or not. Do you think that, like, am I crazy or?
No, I think that people, let me just say this. Right now, I am looking at emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I looked at it when I studied leadership. And I also am now reading From This Place, right? The book called From This Place, Reverend Bernardo, I want to say his name, right, Segovia.
Okay.
And both of them, for me, I had a question. What impact does social location have in regards to emotional intelligence, if any at all, right?
Right.
So we often talk about emotional intelligence and leadership, but lately, several of my ministers and I have been talking about social location. We tend to look at situations based on where we are, where we come from, present, past, and then our thought processes and our opinions are influenced by what we know. And I always say, when I know better, I do better, right?
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with learning new things, because I just know that's how you get people to change, have a change of heart. Because if you want to change a person's action, you got to change their mindset.
Right.
So that's why I think when people are feeling when they challenged by someone that they're saying that you're wrong. And no, we're not saying that you're wrong. We're saying consider the broader picture.
Right.
And it's not about you, the individual, because you do work in an organization that you're accountable and responsible for. And more so, you're responsible for the people who work for you and work with you. I hate the word work for you. I like to say work with you. Because together we get there as a team. So.
Awesome. Well, I could ask you so many more questions, but our 15 minutes is up. It's hard to believe that it went by that fast. I know. So tell our viewers, our listeners, like what you have planned about your upcoming web series that you're doing, and just how people can learn more about working with you as a leadership development consultant.
So what I'm doing is I'm going to be releasing my book in the next 4 or 5 months on leadership and the impact on organizational culture. And what we want to be able to look at is identifying the gap between leadership styles, right? And then identifying what it is you want versus what you have, and how to implement that, what to anticipate when it comes to managing expectations and influencing organizational outcomes, regardless of what kind of business it is, or church it is. You want to be able to do that. And so my call to action is going to have people to just take a self-inventory of their own leadership style and be familiar with that. I mean, we often take inventory of what an organizational want and desire when we do strategic planning, but very seldom do we take self-inventory of the overall leadership and what their employees have to say about them. There are several tools, but we're not intentional about it. We don't design about it. I mean, we inspect a lot of things. What we don't inspect is our leadership style. We just kind of hire folks, and we don't even think about incorporating HR in that process to make sure that when they are interviewing, what they're looking for explicitly, let me just say that. But at the same token, when it comes to employees, we have to be able to look at the gaps from the top to the bottom.
Awesome. Well, in case you guys missed it, Dr. Fowler has a book coming out. She's also going to be doing a series of lives on her page. So make sure you follow her, Dr. Arnita Fowler, so that you can be in tune for some of the conversations that she's going to have with people in her network around leadership topics, because I do believe that many of us have been called to lead, but just because you have the calling doesn't mean you also have the training. And so these will be some great opportunities for you to develop and do some personal inventory on your leadership style. So thank you so much, Dr. Fowler, for being on with me today.
Thank you.
Yes, we look forward to the work that you're going to be doing.
I want to give a shout out, though, to those who are out there doing the work and those who don't know what to do. Get involved and vote.
Yes.
Volunteer at the polls. I'm doing it, so just join me. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.